Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we sat down with creative culture curator Bem Joiner discussing being born and bred in Atlanta, booking Drake and Kendrick Lamar's first shows in the city, and bridging the gap between civic and creative communities. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the IdOMUSIC podcast, and I'm sitting down with creative branding and cultural immersion consultant, Bem Joiner. How you feeling?
I'm doing good. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so explain to me what that means, that title that I just said, because it sounds like a mouthful. What exactly does that mean?
Something that I kind of developed after observing Steve Stout, Coltrane Curtis, and reading Steve Stout's Tanning of America book about how the culture and urban culture can drive sales for brands. So I decided to adopt that model, and I realized that Steve Stout was probably almost a little like 10 years older than me, from New York. Coltrane Curtis is around my same age, Morehouse guy, but he's from New York as well. And so I'm like, well, urban culture, especially when I learned from Isaac Hayes III, the amount of African Americans that live below the Mason-Dixon line and south of the Mississippi, we have a good portion of the culture that happens below the Mississippi River. But there was no one really guiding the conversation about how brands interact with our culture. And so I wanted to kind of be that voice. And since then, I've added a community element to it. But yeah, it kind of came from being influenced by Steve Stout and Coltrane Curtis.
Dope. So born and raised in Atlanta, the West End specifically, and going to high school in North Atlanta. So like you spoke about in a past interview, like being able to see Atlanta from the top to the bottom. So, and then of course, an extension of what you've done for the city is like Atlanta influences everything, the brand, the movement. That's a big thing. You see it around, you see it murals, you see it on, social media. Why is Atlanta so influential, in your opinion, across the world? Like, how have we impacted our culture, or what is it about our culture that it resonates with other people, in your opinion?
And I knew when we came with the saying Atlanta influences everything, that there would have to be that someone from somewhere else might want to debate me on that. So, and everybody has their own reason about why they buy into the slogan or why they buy the shirt or whatever. It's just interesting to hear other people's thoughts about why Atlanta influences everything. But mine was based on in my marketing background. When you work with these ad agencies, they would have a southeastern marketing strategy for a product. And it would be like all the states in the Southeast, and we got to market our product in this territory. And then they would have an Atlanta plan. And I'm like, well, that's weird because Atlanta's in the Southeast. But then I learned in working with these agencies that Atlanta is code word for black at times. So because Atlanta is like this heavy urban city that is nicknamed the Black Mecca, it's a mixture of Grady babies and people that are born here and second, third generation, and then and what they've been able to create from being born on the soil in Atlanta. And then it's a mixture of we've attracted black people from a variety of other places in the U.S. specifically. And, they'll come from Chicago, St. Louis, or Jacksonville, and they would bring whatever little bit of culture they had from their community, their neighborhood, they would bring that with them to Atlanta. And so it's a heavy homegrown thing, but equally as heavy as the amount of other people that have moved here and brought their stuff here to mix in with the homegrown. And because basically it's been determined, especially through the ad agency world, that black culture is cool, and then cool becomes pop culture. And then if you travel the world, you get to see the influence of American pop culture on the rest of the world. So tracing it back to kind of the essence and kind of where trends and where and how things get started, if you were to dig and go back to the beginning, you would find a lot of those roots in Atlanta. Therefore, in my mind, I'm like, it might be going out on a limb, but therefore I feel the right to say that Atlanta influences everything in that manner.
So the Center for Civic Innovation, you've been working there since the beginning, since they started this like sector of Atlanta, I guess a part of the government. Is it a government program or like a department? What is it? I know that I read that, and we've had conversations about bridging the gap between civic engagement and like the creative community here, which one of the things that you aim to do with them. But I just want you to go into your role and how did you get started with them over at this the Center for Civic Innovation. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's 4 years old, and it's our executive director. He is a 34-year-old Indian dude that he worked for the Obama campaign, both campaigns, like running social media. He's part of the social media team. So he was in D.C. for a while. He's Emory undergrad, Harvard grad school guy, and worked in the mayor's office of innovation. I don't even know if he made it a year for our former mayor, but he realized in working for the mayor's office that the name, they weren't really, it was just a name, that the word innovation, the way in which government was treating it, was they were playing it safe. And innovation, the results of innovation in a good way look like the results of, I guess, a six-pack when you work out. But nobody that I know that has a six-pack likes doing crunches. Like there's no good feeling that even though they might like exercising in the results of the six-pack, crunches still feel like crunches. They kind of hurt. And so innovation is not sexy. The end result could be, it's not promised, but it could. But the process of innovation is something that is messy. It hurts. It's uncomfortable. And he realized that government, they don't like to be uncomfortable. They don't like to take risk, which is understandable. A lot of times they playing with taxpayer money, and sometimes if they fail in that risk, they could lose votes. So he decided to get outside of the building. So it's not a government agency. It's a 501c3 nonprofit startup that works with government, sometimes in a favorable manner and sometimes not favorable, where the government doesn't like the Center for Civic Innovation because it's uncovered something or something like that. But he calls it the mayor's office of failure, because we get to test things and do things, and if we fail, then there's a white paper on where we went wrong, what didn't work, and that way somebody following behind us could be like, well, we don't need to do that. That failed over there. Let's try something different. So it's a 501c3 nonprofit separate from the government, but it works with government and larger nonprofits to connect them to these smaller on-the-ground social entrepreneurs, the people that are actually doing the work day in and day out but don't have funding and resources. We kind of play a middleman in between that.
Right. So where's your role specifically since the culmination of this?
Community engagement overall, which is some sort of a translator. The Harvard Kennedy School, where there's they teach this whole social impact, social entrepreneurship thing. I didn't use those words. I understood community engagement, which is at the very bottom level, giving a damn about your community and wanting it to be a great cohesive community. Apparently there's a business model to that, and there's funding, and if you just use other verbiage. He understood that verbiage. I didn't.
He, the director.
Yeah, he knew. I mean, there's a language and a whole business model to this, but in order to get community buy-in, you couldn't come in using that jargon, and so my job has been dot connector and kind of translator for that, and then unofficially, my job has been figuring out where art and culture and the creative fit in that whole process.
Dope. I appreciate that. I mean, you know, having somebody inside of these particular like agencies and organizations within the city that, you know, do push the creative agenda. But why was it important for you to be a part of like shaping the city as these new transformations are coming about with, you know, Atlanta United being a huge brand and Forrest recently winning? Finally bringing us home a championship, Lord. We appreciate you.
For real.
But, you know, just that, the new dome, the new arena, the Super Bowl, and like so on and so forth. Why is it important? And you've been doing this for years. It's not like this is like new to you. But why had that been such an important part of your life to like dedicate your, you know, day-to-day, your profession to doing this?
I think the generation I come from in Atlanta, I'll be 40 at the end of this month, so
that's a blessing.
For real, yo, that shit is crazy. Even thinking that way.
Right.
But that kind of growing up on Outkast and being in high school when Outkast came out and being the same age as Crisscross, and seeing Atlanta kind of grow when the media didn't really recognize Atlanta or care to tell our story. In my mind, I lost my virginity when I was 13.
Okay.
So I am somewhat obviously very aware of my surroundings in life if I'm doing stuff like that. And at that time, I was very well aware of reading Right On magazine, Word Up magazine, Source, Vibe, watching Yo MTV Raps, watching Rap City Basement, that Atlanta was consistently missing from all of these like things reporting on urban culture. And our story wasn't being really told. It was, and if it was touched on, it was being glossed over. And so the Atlantan in my age group compared to our age group in Chicago, LA, or New York, these larger cities, my age group in those cities couldn't tell you when those cities went from like a small town to becoming the major LA. My age group in LA, the LA that we know is the LA they've always known. The same in New York, same in Chicago. Somebody that could tell you when Chicago was kind of small and trying to grow into something, that person is dust. They haven't been here for a while. So the people in my generation in Atlanta can specifically tell you when nobody was caring about Atlanta and it wasn't really a big deal to the way things started happening with Freaknik and the Olympics, and this place used to be an empty lot. Now there's 3 buildings right there. Like, those stories, my generation holds those stories for Atlanta. And it's, if we want our history to be told correctly, then I found, in my mind, it was important to kind of inject myself in as some sort of cultural liaison or storyteller to better, so that people better understand how it came to be. The same way I understand how certain things in New York or LA came to be, because it was written, it's documented or whatever. And again, the people my age there, they don't have any knowledge of that besides reading the same stuff that I read. They can't speak to it from firsthand knowledge. Mm-hmm. But our age group in Atlanta can, and I think that's very special, and that's a responsibility that falls on us. And it was something, the last piece, something that Andrew Young said during our last mayor's race last year, where there's so many transplants in Atlanta. And the problem is, he said that they don't know how and why they got here. Like they here, but they don't know enough about the previous history of Atlanta to understand why things are where they are or whatever, because we haven't done a good job explaining to them. Like, why you go to New York, you know what to expect. Same with LA. But here, the lack of storytelling, it's just kind of been all right, we'll figure. I don't know what it is. I can make it my own, which has been an attractive thing to Atlanta, is that you can come here, create a new life for yourself, carve out your own thing. But sometimes that's at the peril of the native. And so trying to tell our story to find that balance, like people moving here boost the economy, but without a strong local public school system, strong and consistent storytelling, those people moving here can kind of, it could end up being an adverse effect. And now that things aren't moving fluidly because of this push and pull between native and transplant, we also sit as the city we're number one in income inequality, and we have a 4% upward mobility rate, meaning if you're born poor in Atlanta, there's a 96% chance that you'll die poor in Atlanta. So, but a lot of that can be corrected just by dot connecting, pipeline building, and better storytelling.
Have you seen any improvements in that arena? Do you think that people are starting to tell the story of Atlanta?
Yeah, I think, there's an understanding that we need storytelling. So there have been things created, these type of podcasts. You got the Chamber creating this thing called Thea, which is a app for Atlanta-based content. You have another content agency in Butter ATL, and even the story that we try to tell about how influential Atlanta is. So there's a understanding that we need better and consistent storytelling. Who's doing it right or who has it right, I think it's still up in the air. The storytelling piece of Atlanta, I guess first understanding that we needed better storytelling, which we had to come to that understanding. Now there's people that agree to that and are working on it. So the fruits of that and what that brings back to the city is yet to be seen.
That's real. So I want to kind of just see how your professional and upbringing impacted where you are today. So how did it all begin for you in your journey? I know you were bringing artists like Drake and Kendrick Lamar down here to book their very first shows in Atlanta when people didn't really know who they were, which is huge. One, and we'll get to that, but how did it begin? Why were you booking shows at the time? What were you doing prior to all of this community engagement and civic engagement for the creative community as well?
After college, I thought I could fill out a application to become an A&R. I wanted to be an A&R, so And at the time, I went to Jackson State University and got a degree in marketing and advertising. And I came back to Atlanta just winging it, trying to see what I could get into. And the best I could come up with was a consignment manager and in-store events manager at Tower Records in Buckhead. And so I was there for 2 years. I got fired for insubordination. I did an in-store with Bobby Valentino because I went to school with him without the permission of the store manager.
North Atlanta?
Yeah, he went to Sutton in North Atlanta.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I knew he went to Clark.
Yeah. And he's actually from Mississippi, moved here, I think, early middle school, and he went to Sutton. We rode the same school bus at Sutton in North Atlanta.
That's crazy.
And so after Tower Records, I caught a branding job, marketing kind of branding job at this small agency.
Wait, why'd you get fired again?
Insubordination.
Because of an in-store?
Yeah, I went above. My manager was out of town. I asked him about it. He said no before he went out of town. A situation came up where they were going to do the in-store, and they couldn't do it there. They were going to do it at West End Mall, and they couldn't. They ended up not being able to do it there. So they called me back, and knowing the manager said no, I called our corporate office. So I went over his head, and the corporate office agreed to do it. So he wasn't too happy about that, whatever. And I might have been tardy a couple times too, keep it real. But yeah, and from there I started working at this small marketing agency. And so I made contacts at Tower Records with, I did like Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings first in store. Did some DJ Drama, put their stuff on consignment. D4L stuff was on consignment. This was before everybody got big. So I made a couple contacts doing that. And then I always wanted to work behind the scenes in music, but it's like, how do you do it? For other jobs, you go online, see what openings they have, but it's not like that with music. And then realized that the front door of the music industry wasn't going to work for me in Atlanta. So the trying to go up to V103, trying to go up to, Hot 107.9, any label, disturbing the peace. If you didn't have a super N, it's cliquish. And so I found a set of friends, a guy that I went to Jackson State with, and a couple other people, this dude Caleb, who was working at Wish at the time, and he was trying to start this party called Sloppy Seconds. And Sloppy Seconds was a for people that didn't like to be put in boxes, but enjoyed a good time and didn't want to pay a crazy fee to get in the door, bottles and all that. Atlanta has started becoming too dress codey, and you know what I'm saying. And then if you weren't doing a dress code thing, then you would end up at a hood spot, and it's like in MJQ that was Old Faithful. So looking at like what Funk Jazz Cafe was doing with Jason Orr and what Jay Carter was doing with Soul Fusion, my friends and I realized we were a little younger, but still wanted to have that ease of a party. We didn't want it to be hard to party. Right. And so we helped Caleb start Sloppy Seconds. From going to Sloppy Seconds is where I met this girl, Fadia Cater, who at the time Sloppy Seconds started becoming, it was very mixed and multicultural, and then Caleb started wanting to do more experimenting with music, and we used to do a lot of mashups. So you'll hear like one time Don Cannon was spinning and he played Kelly Clarkson, Since You've Been Gone, and then like blended it with something else. And we had the type of crowd that could appreciate that type of blend. But then Caleb starting to want to go like dark experimental garage music. And some of the black people were like, damn, this was cool at first, but now you're starting to go too deep down the rabbit hole. Fadia then saw an opportunity where there was this eclectic, and this was around the time Lupe was doing Kick Push, where black people were like, yeah, I skateboard too, and I do all these other things. And that's when Fadia wanted to start Broken Bougie, which kind of pulled together the City of Ink crowd and all of these black creatives that didn't have a space because they were grouped in and doing business and collaborative projects with black entertainers. And there's a difference, there's obviously overlap, but there's a difference between just a person that identifies as a creative and somebody that identifies as an entertainer. And so our crowd was more of the fashionistas and the wardrobe designers and the back end people that worked in the business, but on the creative end.
Right.
And we wanted to celebrate each other, so we did parties and stuff like that. And then from there, when you look at A3C and as A3C was growing, that same crowd overlapped. And then you look at the blog world and how Two Dope Boys or Pigeons and Planes, how the blog world started becoming more of a force to find new music. And that overlapped into our world because the Visions, even though we all used to go to Visions, but Velvet Room and kind of more of the Alex Goodwin club scene in Atlanta was so tied to what was on radio. And anybody who knew where the good music was, you knew it wasn't on radio. And so the blog world, the blog kind of, even before SoundCloud, that world overlapped with the way we approached partying and events, kind of trend-setting, breaking new stuff. We didn't need a line of 1,000 people outside. That's Gen Pop.
Right.
We needed 50, 60 dope-ass people that would, that owned their space and that was good at what they did. And then we knew stuff would take off from there. And so because Drake and Kendrick, the internet had them before the radio had them, it was a lot easier for us to contact them and do those shows. I remember for Drake in particular, we went to Jay Carter and we went to Greg Street. And I remember Greg Street asked us about Drake's BDS spins. And at the time, 3 months later, he had some BDS spins, but at the time, he didn't. And Greg said he couldn't really help us. He didn't really know who he was. So yeah, that's how it all started. Just as the same as we just caught that wave of blogs gaining more power, festivals gaining power, the creatives gaining a little bit more power.
How did you convince whoever y'all had the shows to book them, like to say, you know, we'll go with this show? Like, was it a matter of just getting the venue and just selling tickets, or like how did that process work?
Yeah, it was for the Drake. We always had like a cool mentor in Richard Dunn, and Richard Dunn was had connected us a while back with Nikki over at Center Stage, and Center Stage is like a ticket alternative type of venue, and you look at the Live Nation venues as equal to radio and the major clubs. Like they all, if you ain't talking money, big money, like whatever, but we had enough of a relationship with Center. And then one of the guys we were doing a show with, the guy I met at Jackson State, Jabari Graham, he had started this art show called Arts Beats Lyrics that had gotten enough of a following that the people at Center Stage and some of these other venues would say, well, oh, okay, you're the person behind Arts Beats Lyrics. You want to do another type of show? It was a less risky thing to go with what he was doing. And then once Fadia could show, you know, broken bougie, that was doing something because these smaller venues were open to more taking risk on us through contacts and that we had already done enough. And then the Drake show, it wasn't at center stage because he wasn't that big at the time. We did it at the Loft, 500-600 people. Tickets sold out in an hour though. Okay. That's how they knew that we had something. And the same with Kendrick Lamar. That was at the original Masquerade on the bottom, Heaven or Hell. So another room that held 500 people. Mm-hmm. So their risk wasn't, you just we just need to spot that whole 500. We're not asking for the big room.
Right.
So it was a, easier risk for them to take.
That's dope. That's really, really a dope experience. So I wanted to get into like your upbringing though, mm-hmm. because I know off the record we kind of had a conversation about how your upbringing impacted the way you connect with and like aid in the change in your community. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a thought really. It's just embedded in how you grew up. Mm-hmm. So tell me about that and how that really impacted you.
Well, I have to always remind, especially in Atlanta, where there's certain days, depending on your route, where you could travel and might not see white people. That black people aren't monolithic in Atlanta. It's like Wakanda for real. It's like different tribes. And so a lot of people, you hear about Southwest Atlanta and Cascade and kind of Campbellton Road, that area. And then, IdOMUSIC, you'll hear about like Bankhead and like this very hood. And I don't, maybe because I'm from the West End, maybe I don't hear it, but I don't hear people talk about the West End that much. But real Atlantans know what the West End is, and it's it's like in between Cascade and Bankhead. It's got these old Southern kind of Victorian homes, and it's always been this kind of do-for-self community that holds the Malcolm X Festival every year. Like, I don't think Cascade, there's no knock on the Cascade black person, but Cascade, I don't see Cascade holding a festival for Malcolm X. Not that they have anything against them. That's just not the Cascade vibe. And then I don't see Bankhead, for a whole nother set of reasons, holding a Malcolm X festival. The West End is a place where you would go and you hear these chants of free the people, free the land. And, there was a store, a health food store across the street from the Kroger on Abernathy that was called Coochie Chakalia, which is one of the days of Kwanzaa. And there was like all these Kwanzaa celebrations. You had Rastafarians and Hebrew Israelites, Muslims, especially over by West End Park. And so I was babysat by a former Black Panther, H-Rap Brown, who then became a Muslim, and Jamil El Amin, Imam El Amin. He and my father were friends. So just this very kind of Afrocentric upbringing with Morehouse and Spelman around the corner. So I had my math tutor went to Spelman, and I just had like an older brother mentor type guy that went to Morehouse. He was the one that saw me reading Right On and Word Up, I think, when I was in the 7th grade, and was like, nah, that ain't real hip hop. And he put the first Source magazine in my hand. And so with those Victorian homes, though, you still had white people. It was a white area in the 50s, and then white flight. And so you had some whites that stayed, it's just a small handful, but then you had other whites that we used to laugh, the black people in the community would laugh because they were in love with these old Victorian homes. But there were other neighborhoods in Atlanta that had them, mm-hmm. Inman Park. And so you figure white people want to stay around white people, but the white ones that would come to the West End, it would be a running joke that you knew their money wasn't right if they were getting a Victorian home in the West End versus Inman Park. And then anybody else that knew the West End knew that West End Mall, regardless of everything I just said about, Afrocentric this,
History, yeah.
West End Mall is like the bastion of ratchetness. It just breathes out of there. And so you got this ratchet mall in the middle of this Afrocentric neighborhood.
It's very interesting.
With these kind of Ivy League HBCUs, like right up the street. So it was just this mixture of culmination of a variety of blackness. And then you take that blackness and from elementary through high school, ship it across town to go to still Atlanta public schools, but public schools in Buckhead. That all kind of just added to, I guess, however I present myself today.
Yeah, I definitely think so. So even just having a connection to the political landscape in the city, I read something that said that you've shaken every mayor's hand since Sam.
Oh, Sam Massell, the last white mayor. Yeah.
The last white mayor. That was the first mayor that you shook, or the first mayor of Atlanta that you shook hands with.
Yeah, I never set out to do that. It's something that hit me one day. I'm like, damn, yo.
I'm like, was that intentional?
Yeah, I really just, in different situations, it dawned on me that I actually have gotten a chance to shake.
How old were you during Sam Massell's?
Oh, I wasn't born when he was the mayor. So I never shook his hand when he was mayor.
Got you.
I've just gotten a chance to shake every mayor's hand.
Got you.
Yeah.
Because I was like, he was in like 70 something.
Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of took you over to working on this Vote Local campaign, which I thought was cool for you to be a part of. Did you start that? How did you come run into like working on that campaign?
It was a Center for Civic Innovation initiative.
Okay.
And we, the last mayor just had so much controversy and so many things surrounding him. And we knew the city was changing, the infrastructure of the city, the people. And you could tell that there had to be some sort of voter engagement and not voter registration. There's always a lot of focus on voter registration. But I just don't know of too many people that, besides folks that are felons or whatever, that at this point are not registered. And so what we knew was registration wasn't the problem. People were registered, but they aren't feeling moved to go vote. Mm-hmm. And then the mayor's race made it even more complicated because there were officially 15 people running for mayor. So there needed to be some sort of guide that was nonpartisan, didn't lean one way or the other, but just gave the information. Because also within the last 8 years of our previous mayor, there were so many new residents that had come. And again, as Andrew Young said, they didn't know the difference between Kasim Reed and Kwanzaa Hall. Like if you white and you from somewhere else and you moved here for work,
you wouldn't know.
Yeah, it's black guys. I don't know what Keisha. I don't know. And then they didn't understand. Like when people come telling you, well, we got to keep the mayor black, and if you're new here, you're like, well, what does that have to do with policy or what? They don't. There was so many people that didn't understand why we acted in a certain manner and why we, how the runoff could even come down to Keisha and Mary. So we used the Vote Local. It was a guide and a website that would just kind of tell people where to, this is how you find your precinct. These are the things that the mayor controls. In certain places, the mayor has control over the school system as well. Mm-hmm. But in Atlanta, if you're angry about Atlanta public schools, you don't complain to the mayor because our mayor, they're separate. So a lot of people wouldn't know those little nuances like that. So it was just more of a guide to explain Atlanta specifics about how we do government.
I know you have a daughter.
Mm-hmm. And a son.
And a son now. Yeah. So what do you want for your children to see as they grow up in this city? And how are you making that happen?
Man, I've already thought. I think about that a lot. My kids, other people's kids. Atlanta was basically built on this. We had a black upper class, black money, but in order to build the infrastructure of the city and make it sustainable, it was a strong middle class. And so we come from that Atlanta that had, which is what Cascade and West End had a good portion of, was a very strong black middle class. And in America now, middle class has been wiped away just really overall. It's either the haves or the haves not. But I think in Atlanta, the more I found out that as a city, we valued like Morehouse and Spelman as these cultural education institutions that put out, lawyers and doctors and
business.
Yeah, like
so on and so forth.
But the creative class was never a priority of the city and never worked in to the way the city addresses policy and builds infrastructure around things. And so moving forward, I would love for my kids to grow up in or visit or just be around full-scale black communities, multicultural as well, but with this heavy, black lean, but the family unit is intact and is based on, is built around creative culture, where the one parent is a urban planner, another parent works at an ad agency. And these are things I see on the Beltline with white people. You hear it all the time, like, oh, I'm an urban planner. I'm working on the Beltline and this and this and that. And then the husband, he'll work at some cool little branding agency. It's like, man, how y'all get these jobs? And it's to bring it out of the sky, and they are paying a mortgage on a house and taking care of their family based on some sort of either entrepreneurial, or even if it's not entrepreneurial, if it's creative and they working for someone else, they work for somewhere else that respects their creative power and lets them kind of be free in that creative space. So these communities that are built off of a creative economy, and I want my kids to see their parents as well as their peers' parents that, are not, I get off work, that whole like groan when you get home. And some days are better than others, but I want them to see a creative way of living and a more independent way of living from these big, large institutions and infrastructures.
Right.
And I want them to see that a good household come from that. So that same type of Niski Lake, let's redo Niski Lake for the creative class. Mm-hmm. Like, that's something that I don't know if black people in the U.S. at all have seen a neighborhood in a community of black people based off of creative class.
No, definitely not.
We've gotten it from Bill, like the whole Cosby show with the doctor and the lawyer. We've been able to, and we need doctors and lawyers.
For sure.
Real estate agent, we got a ton of them.
Everybody's not going to be creative necessarily, but to have the freedom to be able to, tap into that side, even if you are a doctor or a lawyer, there's so many innovative ways to tap into those sides and to see that it's possible. Because even with the school system and like how a lot of the art programs have been taken out of the school system, it's not a primary focus, and they focus heavily on STEM when they were realizing a lot of people weren't trying to focus on STEM. It just kind of, it needs to be a balance of everything. And show that it is possible. So I love that. So why would you say that you're the right person for this job, and like just what you're doing overall for the community? Why do you think you're the right person for that?
Oh, well, if there was a writer person, by all means, please have at it. I didn't know if I was the right. I never knew it was a thing. I'm just doing. Shit, man. I said a prayer in 2012 that I had inside me. I felt I was somebody. I felt that I had a particular thing, a particular trait that would make me uniquely who I am, separate from you. But you can feel that way all day, but if no one on the outside sees it, that's just something that's just within you.
Right.
And you can't make anybody that's dealing with you respect you for that unless they naturally decide to respect you for that. And so my prayer was that whatever I felt like was on the inside, that it would shine outwardly and that people would identify me as how I felt I identified myself. And so that prayer being answered put me as the right person for this job, whether that's what I said or whether that's what I wanted to do or not. Once it started shining outwardly and you just going with that flow of people identifying you as that and man, like accepting you as that vibe will take you somewhere. And that vibe has since carried me here. Now, once I started working at the Center for Civic Innovation, I became more intentional with that vibe because there's a vibe, you can ride the wave and then you can really start to steer and control the wave that you're riding. It's a difference. And so my adultness and my parentness in me make me more intentional on controlling that space. And when I look at my background and it's like, why did I have all of these experiences? Why, when other people were at Doug or other schools with black peers, why did I have a multicultural friendship base? Why did I become an Eagle Scout? I didn't know that shit was lame, but my mom was like, you got to do it. And I became a certified scuba diver in the 8th grade. Like, why the hell? Why? So all of these things have, in my mind, were for this reason of being this kind of multifaceted Swiss Army knife black person from Atlanta, that when I see other young people, there's such a disconnect in the world before digital and then the things that have come since this technology boom in digital, that even my peers that I graduated from high school with, man, they have no clue about like how to podcast. I don't like to think I'm that old, so these are my peers, and they, like a Sammy approved, like how you built your career. People I graduated high school with are dumbfounded as to like, damn, and then they're dumbfounded at how you built your career. Now, what's interesting is that these same people I went to school with will have a daughter or a son that is trying to pattern themselves after you or after Curtis or somebody like that, but the parents can't even help them because they don't know.
Right.
So what has happened is my social media, they might not understand really what the hell I do neither, but so weird to say, because my social media apparently resembles their kids' social media.
Really?
They then say, well, they'll shoot me messages like, yo, I think you do, my kid, I think y'all do something similar or whatever, can you help? And so that the many can you help messages from my peers on either some stuff that they're trying to do, some dreams that they've always wanted to get out, or more often than not, it's their kids. And they don't have an idea of where to even begin to help their kid who wants to design Nikes. Like, they don't even know.
Right.
And so I've accepted that responsibility. So I guess that's what makes me perfect for I don't know if I'm perfect for it, but right now I'm kind of all they got in Atlanta.
You the right person. You the right person for the job. So we have to ask you what exactly is up next for BAME? What's up next for this? I don't know why I can't get these words out. Center for Civic Innovation. And just like, overall what the goal is for you moving forward into 2019.
Man, my mom be telling people I work at the Civic Center.
Civic Center.
Well, so I will no longer be full-time at the Center for Civic Innovation starting in January. I'll be doing some consulting with them. But I have to kind of explore
different options.
Yeah, but all in everything we've talked about. So it's a unique time in the city. Right now, the city doesn't have a cultural plan. And the fact that the city has admitted that it never looked at art and culture as a business driver, but is trying to correct that now, and looking at, we were talking like Nashville, and looking at more of like the Nashville formula, how music and entertainment is worked into their
structure,
policy and structure. My time at the Center for Civic Innovation and my background in throwing parties, I have this multifaceted skill set that I can talk to somebody who will make a policy around it and not just look at it from, shit, I know entertainment, so I'm finna just tell you about this entertainment. I don't know what you talking about. I know what they want from a economic development and workforce development. That's what I've learned how to do, is
fuse the two.
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff that the creative class does, if structure was put around it, would lead to economic development and workforce development. We just don't use that language.
Right.
And so exploring that space more, kind of owning that space more, and being more of a consultant to our local government and how to connect those dots. That's really my plan for next year. The Center for Civic Innovation is working on the NPU system in Atlanta. The Neighborhood Planning Unit system is kind of, it's been around since when Maynard started it in 73 or 74, but it hasn't caught up to the digital age. And so that's kind of broken, and the center will be doing a lot of work, like an audit of the NPU system and doing a report on how to bring it up to speed for the day and age we live in. So that's what the center will be doing. And then other than that, I'm, raising a family, I guess, Yeah.
Oh, yes, raise your family, and definitely let me know if you need any assistance with,
babysitting.
I babysit. I babysit. I do. I have 3 nieces and a nephew myself. So,
okay. But nah, I know what to hit you for though.
Yeah,
you making moves. So yeah, I got you.
Yeah, we've had great conversations. So I'm excited that we were able to sit you down for a second. Tell them where they can find you on social media to keep up with what you got going on.
So all my personal social media is under my name. I don't have like a nickname or anything. So it's just Bem Joiner. So you just Google. But Facebook, Bem Joiner, BEMJOINER, Instagram, just all of the things. Not Snapchat. I think I got a Snapchat profile. I'm kind of straight on that. But everything is under my name. I don't have any weird things. And then the site, AIE.life, the Atlanta Influence Everything site, and that's AIE.life.
Yes. Just keep putting on for the city. I appreciate people like you. It's very rare that we run into our Atlanta natives. I actually just sat down with your cousin.
Yo, Nick.
Because I meant to hit him before so I could get the real tea on you, but it's all good. Next conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Bem, for sitting down with me. And as always, you guys can find this podcast at IDM Podcast on all social media channels, as well as me, Sammy Approved, on social media.
Man, thank y'all. Shout out to IdOMUSIC. Shout out to Curtis, Patchwerk, man. Appreciate what y'all do for the community.
We appreciate you. All right. Peace.
Sonically superior.